Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to our high-level plenary that will tackle the topic of loneliness and community with two extraordinary women. Our speakers represent young, successful mothers who tackle social issues in their day-to-day work and life spheres. With me today are Her Excellency Sheikha Hind bint Hamad Al Thani, Vice Chairperson and CEO of Qatar Foundation, and Her Excellency Sümeyye Erdoğan Bayraktar, KADEM Deputy Chairwoman. Welcome, Your Excellencies.
Thank you.
Your Excellencies, loneliness is more than just feeling sad or being alone. It is a sense of disconnect and isolation with devastating effects on both mental and physical health. Statistics show that more and more individuals are feeling that disconnect. Why do you think is that? Let me start the question with Her Excellency Sheikha Hind.
Thank you, Sheikha. I think that the issue of loneliness isn't something new. I feel that today we are more and more connected to the global world, but less so with family and friends who are in our immediate community. And to tackle loneliness, we really have to think about forming real relationships with our family members, with the community that we live in. It's not, again, it's not a new problem, and we've seen it over and over again. But I do feel that the more that we are connected digitally, the less meaningful relationships we're having. And as a mother, I know that I struggle with thinking about, am I doing enough with my children when it comes to building these relationships so that they feel that they've got a safe home where they feel that they can reach out if they need the support in their day-to-day lives. And I think that when it comes to loneliness in general, there's still a lot for us to understand there. Why do people feel lonely? How can we tackle these issues? But I strongly believe that it's relationships and meaningful relationships, not just the number of hours you spend in a day with people, but the relationships that you build with these people by understanding them and learning about their lives, and in turn sharing about yours.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sheikha Hind. Can I hear from you, Your Excellency Sümeyye?
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Well, concerning the reasons for the increase in loneliness, simply put, being alone, that is getting more and more common, is the first and foremost reason for loneliness. And yes, loneliness does not mean being alone. Depending on how it's managed, being alone may very well be beneficial. For example, deep intellectual activities usually require one to be alone. Likewise, contemplating, turning into and discovering the inner self needs a bit of solitary. Remember how a lot of the prophets chose to live some periods of their lives in solitude in order to purify their soul in a way. According to a recent study, loneliness empowers areas in the brain tied to imagination. However, being alone is one of the strongest causes that brings loneliness. Studies show that self-rating assessments of loneliness correlate very highly with living alone, widowhood, and bereavement. Humans are social beings. We need one another. So for most of the cases, it is not realistic to expect people to cope up fine with being alone. And when you cannot cope up with it, that is when it turns into loneliness. Of course, there are so many reasons behind the rising trend of living alone, and they all could be another panel topic. So without going into them, I will try to just mention some of them. Firstly, urbanization, where families are nuclear, the role of the family as a primary producer diminishes, and prosperity rises as to make it possible financially for individuals to live alone. Then failing nuclear families, which increases rates of divorce. Then changing demographic factors, such as decreasing fertility rates, higher life expectancy, postponing marriages with the growth in higher education and financial issues. or increase in the number of people who do not get married at all, and also increasing migration that tears families apart. Another factor is weakening in relations in general, starting from family to kin networks and neighbor ties. Modernity, of course, an important element, including individualism and increasing demands for privacy. And lastly, of course, women's rights movements, a hot topic that has both downsides and many important gains for women and justice in the society at the same time. And at the same time resulting in more women in education and the workforce, which usually means less fertility. I do see the fall of fertility as a problem, but I also see women's lack of representation as a problem. So to my understanding, if there is something to blame for the fall on fertility, it cannot be only on the women. It should be on the system that separated families sharply from work, making it difficult for people to work and care for the family at the same time. And the system where men are taken completely out of the family course. So if there is something to blame, it should be on the mentality that still cannot grasp how important and how natural it actually is for women to be represented in decision-making mechanisms. So the real solution here is to find ways to create family-friendly work environments, family-friendly organization, and, well, I really don't want to offend anyone here, but family-friendly men. Once we work for these, then we can see a light of hope to increase fertility rates and more resilient families, and hopefully less living alone. And all of these reasons are not direct causes of loneliness. For example, some aspects of modernity, such as communications and trade, may lift some people out of loneliness. And the other way around, some people can feel very lonely even though they do not live alone. So this brings us to other causes of loneliness, other than being alone, such as weakness in communication, repressive environments, mental breakdowns. Of course, these are all interconnected, and I can touch upon these elements a little later.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sümeyye and Your Excellency Shahahan for very enriching input. Now, let me start with another question. How does marriage, in your opinion, play into loneliness? Is marriage a solution, or is loneliness an underlying factor that can affect even married and those living with extended family units? Let me start with you, Your Excellency Sümeyye.
Okay. Well, marriage obviously is the exact opposite of being alone. Since being alone is the biggest cause of loneliness, marriage and family is the most common antidote for loneliness. And from the sociological approach, it is suggested in the literature that lack of marital and/or family ties are the two structural conditions assumed to promote loneliness. And this correlation can be attributed firstly to domestic integration, where ties to a spouse or children are seen as adding meaning to life. These ties that work through mutual obligations and responsibilities, and in good examples through mutual caring, love, and respect, create a more supportive and convenient environment in comparison to the single life. Such close ties create intimacy, which is more difficult to establish in public environments. This also means confidence. Having an intimate confidant whom you can trust is what makes marriage critical. Married people mostly report that their spouse is their main confidant. And interestingly, according to some studies, confidants outside of marriages are not sufficient to protect people from loneliness the way spousal confidants do. Cohabitants outside of marriage have also been studied, and the results are that married people have higher mental well-being than cohabitants. Of course, not being alone, intimacy, and confidence are not the only aspects of marriage that protects against loneliness. There are more indirect factors, such as economic and physical health. When couples who are both employed combine their income, they tend to have a higher life standard, and that brings better mental health. Furthermore, married couples are reported to have better health conditions due to discouragement of risky behaviors such as drinking and smoking, encouragement of a healthy diet, and medical treatment as necessary, and so on. Physical health, in turn, affects mental health in a positive way. Probably due to all of these aspects, married people report higher levels of mental well-being, lower levels of depression, mortality, and suicide, and higher levels of happiness, all of which decrease remarkably the risk of loneliness. And also having children, of course, is another key source of motivation for parents. Durkheim suggests parents to have better mental health than childless couples. His theory is that prioritizing children's needs provides parents with more integration and meaning. And add to that the natural social network that parents enter via the children, such as school and other health care and play environments. But of course, not all marriages are ideal. The ability to establish a healthy communication with the spouse and the children is not an easy thing. I believe that to be one of the most common reasons of failure in marriages. Some studies undertaken in the US and Canada show that children may not have an effect on the loneliness of the elderly, and even worse, elderly with children felt more lonely. This was very striking for me and hard to believe indeed. Well, the reason may be that families with children raise their expectations towards socialization and loneliness, or even that they involve less in other socialization opportunities. And of course, the picture in eastern parts of the world may also be different when it comes to familial dynamics. But in any case, it shows how the lack of communication inside families could be more distressing than outside relations. And another basic issue with marriage is that meeting the personal needs and desires of each member in the family and keeping the family together can also be a tough challenge. When the unity of a family means oppressing one of the spouses, we cannot talk about a strong marriage there. A strong marriage is when both spouses flourish. And even worse, when those families with oppression do not have outside control mechanisms, such as respected extended family members or neighborhood ties, or just simply governmental institutions, then there begins the risk of violence and criminal behaviors. And that is why it is very important to stress that the privacy of a household, of a marriage, does not in any way give the right to torture, does not mean that it is exempt from punishment. When an individual cannot realize his or her potential inside the family, and when the communication is weak, the individual starts feeling lonely. Nevertheless, the connection between marriage and loneliness may not be as simple as we would think. Both from my own experiences and from the readings I've done for this conference, I can totally say that marriage is definitely one of the strongest institutions to improve the general well-being of individuals. However, since the failure scenarios can be very harmful, we have to work very hard to improve the institution of marriage. And I have some suggestions to improve this institution, but I don't want to make it such a long answer. So maybe I can pass the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sümeyye. Very important points you highlighted, actually. Where do you think Your Excellency Sheikh Hind, especially when Her Excellency highlighted the point of the lack of connection in marriage, and how does marriage play a role in loneliness?
So first, I want to refer to a point that Sümeyye mentioned in her previous answer, which is related to the family-life balance. It's interesting because they never ask the father that. They always ask the mother, how do you balance between your family and your work? And I mean, my honest answer is that there's never a balance, and it's just a matter of continuing to adapt as you go along, as your children grow. But at the same time, it also highlights the fact that we don't expect men to be as involved in our children's lives, which I think highlights a big issue when it comes to expectations when you go into a marriage. What are the expectations of both? I think it's too much of a burden to put on marriage to solve problems or to be a solution, because as I think most of us know, there are more commitments that you have when you're married. And so if we are not going into it with confidence, with a true recognition of what we want and a commitment to what we expect to have from this marriage, and at the same time aligning with our partner with these expectations, then the issues are continuing to evolve and the challenges continue. And I think, to be fair to children as well, oftentimes I hear that, you know, marriage brings stability, or because you'll have the children and they'll give you that stability. But to be fair to children, I think we as parents need to have the wholeness within us. We need to feel complete without our partner, because that reflects on our children as well. It shows them that we can be confident mothers who work and who are there for our children, and at the same time we are part of this family, and our husbands are part of this family as well. It's very important for children to understand that the father figure is not one that is absent. The father figure is as engaged in their lives as a mother is. There are statistics that we've done with research that we've done in DIFI that shows that fathers spend less time with their children than mothers. With COVID, the numbers have changed and shows that they spend more time. I question the quality of that time, because I think it's just a matter of not being able to go out as we would have otherwise. And that goes back to the issue of the time, and again, the relationships that we build with our children. It's important that not just our children, but also with our partners, it's important that these relationships are built in an equal way, where each individual is respected, including the children. We need to respect that our children are the ones that we brought up to have a voice as well. And it's important that they feel like they have this security within their home. And so I think that in terms of loneliness, marriage can play a part, definitely, if the expectations are clear and we do not put too much of a burden on having marriage as a solution for all our problems. And yeah, so there was one point that I wanted to make, but I'll keep it for, I think, the next question.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, for a very enriching input, and I actually agree that there is some kind of, you know, responsibilities that lays on one of the spouses, which is the woman in the end, and I believe that family institution is a communication and you know, a mutual effort from both spouses, just for the family's sake. Now, in modern life, Your Excellencies, is modern life making us more alone, do you think? And let me start this question with Her Excellency Sheikha Hind.
This is a tricky question, because I don't think we're able to objectively make a comparison. I think that we're all living in this modern life today, and so maybe the problems that we see today are nothing compared to what our ancestors had to deal with. I think it's important for us to deconstruct the issue. Again, when we go back to loneliness, I think maybe the modern day is giving us more tools that we have access to, that could just reveal the challenges that we're faced with every day. But I'm not sure that it's actually I'm not sure that it's an instigator for loneliness. I think that, again, you might be, even 100 years ago, you might be in a family of 10 people, but still feel lonely because you weren't able to have a meaningful exchange and experience with your siblings or with your parents. And I think, yes, the modern day has given us technology, which I think maybe takes more time away from the social gatherings, but at the same time, it makes me question if we had meaningful social environments, would we choose the digital relationships over our social relationships? And I'm not sure that, again, we have the answer for it today, but it is something that we do have to keep in mind when we think of the tools that we also provide our children. We shouldn't be giving them access to a world that we're not sure supports them in their mental health. There are many more studies coming out about the effects of the digital world on children and their mental health, and how children today are lonelier. But again, I think as parents, we also have a responsibility towards our children to provide them with the safe haven that should be in their home, and spending quality time with the children, and not saying no when it's so easy to say no when you've had a long day and want to, you know, read a book or watch TV, and your child wants you to play with them, and you just say no, not now. I think it's stopping ourselves in moments like this and really thinking about the effect of such an easy word on a child in the long run.
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Excellency, Sheikha. And let me start the question with you, Your Excellency, Sümeyye. What do you think about the modern life? Is it making us more alone or not?
I agree, Hind, that it's a very tricky question because it both has downsides and positive sides. Like when you look into the ease of transportation and communication technologies, we should be actually socializing more, one would expect. So in a sense, it does have more accessibility in that sense. However, at the same time, the rise of individualism that came with modernity, I think that's what the problem is. When the perspectives work in a way to give importance on me and you, like saying I and you, and giving much stress on individuals rather than the well-being of the societies or the families as a whole, then there starts being loneliness. And also, I think there is something that needs to be worked upon on raising children. I think in modern times, we're missing creating that belonging. And actually, this is tied to the next question, but since we're missing that, establishing this belonging in children, in the family, in very early childhood, then we see a problem in children in socializing, because once they cannot create that belonging to their family, to their mother and father at the first place, then they have difficulty in connecting to the outer world. So that's something we need to focus on.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Sümeyye. Now let me take you to the fourth question, which is linked to the point that both of Your Excellencies mentioned, which is the quality of time in family, like from isolation to community. How can new parents nurture a strong sense of belonging in their children? And let me forward this question to Her Excellency, Sümeyye.
Well, the first phase of human development is called socialization by many. The most important part of socialization, in my opinion, is to socialize a child. Firstly, to her family, starting from mom, dad, to siblings, and to the larger family network. We tend to assume that children know us and they truly sense us, and that is important. But to strengthen the bonds, we need to invite our children to be a part of our family past. So sharing memories, connecting them to an older relative through his commonalities or differences. Say, for example, your stubborn nature looks so much like your granny, or your curly hair comes from your daddy's uncle. Or like, once my daddy also failed in a big competition, and I remember him saying that he learned more from failure than all his successes. So these memory sharing, can easily be a part of our daily routines. Storytelling, like conversations about family, and culture helps children be part of a larger community. Through these stories, they discover problem solving in hard times, appreciate differences as well as commonalities, cherish unity despite challenging moments. And secondly, we need to connect children to the larger society. This can be in many ways. If possible, safe neighborhoods are the easiest way to develop this belonging. But if not, I find it extremely important to create socializing routines among family friends network, fixed meeting days, play dates, etc. And third, creating fixed family routines to make children experience happiness. We need to build new memories that they will turn back to in times of stress. For example, Fridays are our holidays, why not fix it as a day of warm, large family dinners? If the extended family is spread out, then a day of celebration when we dress nicely, exchange gifts, etc. Or example, Saturdays are playing days. And fourth, another thing that I find very important is to include children to be part of our daily lives. Teach them to help out, to produce, to contribute. They will feel valuable and worthy. And also very important is to talk about historic figures, events that we all share as community and as country. Make them part of that chain of nationhood. Bonding starts from the close circle of family, which is home, to neighborhood, to city, country, neighboring countries, and far lands. So from family to nation to internationality. 6, trips and visits to important sites in your city, your country. This also strengthens the bonding. So bonding in space with like sightseeing, walks in the nature, and then bonding in time, which is sharing and keeping alive memories and tradition. And bonding in people, which is meeting people, having routines with different people in our communities. So routines develop a sense of trust and improve mental well-being.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sümeyye, and for you, Your Excellency Sheikha Her Excellency Sümeyye highlighted the point of socializing our kids and engaging our kids in our daily life. What's your point of view when it comes to how do parents nurture a strong sense of belonging in their children?
So just as a disclaimer, I try to learn every day, and I'm by no means am I doing it correctly. And I think also that's also important to recognize, because as we evolve and as our kids evolve, the world around us is evolving. And it's very important for us to be adaptable and listen to what our children need as they grow. In terms of the sense of belonging, I think it's critical for us to nurture confident children. And for them to be confident, they need to be confident in their identity, which means they need to be proud of the environment that they're living in, the country that they're living in, the language that they speak, their religion, the family unit that they come from. Because only then, if they truly understand where they come from, they can really combat anything that comes in front of them. We don't worry about the influences, and we don't worry that they get exposed to the things that where we don't want them to be exposed to, because we should give them the tools to be able to fight these different ideologies or ideas that come from all over the world. And I think that if we are giving them, I mean, everything is in their fingertips today. They have access to everything, and we're never going to be able to supervise everything that they do. And to protect them and make sure that they understand safety and the things that, and understand where they come from, we really have to spend time to build that in them as well. And I mean, as Sümeyye mentioned, the conversations that we have with our children are critical, and they need to start very young, and they need to also feel like they are able to ask the questions, and we have the time to answer these questions, and we have the time to spend with them to expose them to these beliefs and ideologies that we have, and as well as the relationships that they should be building with their family members, extended family members, and even in their community. they need to be part of this community. They need to feel like they belong to this community. And they can only do so if they understand who they are and how they're connected to this community. And I think for us to just, expect that, all children are born in this country, so they're from that country and they have that religion, that I think is very passive, and we need to be more active in nurturing what that means. When we talk about religion or we talk about the country that they come from, we need to make sure that they also understand it. And only then could we really nurture confident individuals that continue to grow and continue to have that love for learning.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for very enriching input. Now, from that, Your Excellency, Sheikha Hind, how do we bring back the healthy support network of neighborhoods?
Neighborhoods today are not just, in your physical neighborhood. And I think that's something that we have to acknowledge. We have to acknowledge that today we are connected globally. And so we build these communities all around the world, which is why it's important for us to provide the right tools for our family to understand which communities, which communities they belong to, but also which communities they represent. So that even if they are connected to communities that they don't belong to, they're there to represent their own community, and they are confident in that community that they come from. And there are many ways to do it. I think it's also important to make sure that we're open to different ideas in different countries and different backgrounds, because also that's the way that we learn about others. And sometimes it's not about learning about what you're missing, but actually it just it reinforces who you are and what you believe in, which is why, again, it's important that we take the time to understand, to learn, and to explain to our children as well where all of this comes from, where our beliefs come from, why we do the things that we do, why our grandparents did the things that they did. And not just in a passive way, but truly in a way that they understand it and they're able to take it on with or without you. You're comfortable that they understand who they are and what community they represent.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Sheikha Hind. Now, Your Excellency, Sümeyye, in your opinion, how do we bring back the healthy support network of neighborhoods, in your opinion?
Values that help socialization need to be cultivated in children and also upheld among the society, like empathy, altruism, generosity, tasting the beauty of making someone else happy. All of these qualities need to be cultivated in children starting in infancy. Like a very small example, like for example, our reactions when we see a bug at home. For a very small example, do we kill it right away? Even when we don't have to, of course, sometimes we have to, but with a gross look in our faces. Or do we gently take it with something and throw it out of the window and show our baby that all creatures have a right to live and we have to respect them? Or our attitudes. When a friend gets sick, do we call our friend and pay a visit if we can? And do we take our children with us, if it's appropriate, so that they witness and be a part of this experience? And our manners with our neighbors. Do we exchange small gifts if we can and let our kid know what and why we're doing? Do we pay visits from time to time, invite home? I know for some societies, some neighborhoods, these may look like impossible, but I have the hope that once somebody starts it and keep on doing it, others will respond, because our very nature feels the need for social connection, and it makes everyone more content, except, of course, people with psychological problems. So I do see a light of hope there.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Sümeyye, such an important point that from both of you if Your Excellencies highlighted the neighborhood perspective. It's not like all day. It's now a global system. And from Your Excellency Sümeyye, the importance of the connection. Now, Your Excellencies, we are reaching to the end of this session, but before closing, I would like from both of Your Excellencies to have an enclosing message to the community when it's come to loneliness, community, and family. Let me start with Your Excellency, Sheikha Hind.
Thank you, Sheikha. I think we should recognize that each one of us has some loneliness in them. And it's not, people shouldn't feel that they are alone in loneliness as well. And to reach out and have these conversations with your family or your friends and express yourself. Because it's important that you try to find an avenue for you as well. I think that it's important for us from the very beginning to teach our children the right words to use to express their emotions, so that as they grow as adults, they're able to express themselves and be able to voice if they are feeling lonely. And finally, we continue to grow and we continue to learn. And I think it's important to have these sessions and have these communications to be able to understand better how we can play an important part in supporting others and supporting ourselves and our family as well.
Absolutely beautiful. Now, Your Excellency Sümeyye, what's your closing message for the community?
I believe that loneliness is something that can be worked on. And I think families have the biggest responsibility here. And this responsibility is, I think, both to empower the individuals, like the members of the family, members of the community, for what they are, to communicate, to give them representation, to give them voice, to empower them, to make them realize their potential, and at the same time, bring back this perspective of us rather than you and I. So when you have that connection and at the same time realization of the individual's potentials, then we can fight loneliness, inshallah. And it was a great opportunity for me to be at this panel. I thank very much to the organizers of Doha International Family Institute for hosting this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, for a very thoughtful and interesting discussion. It has been an absolute pleasure. Dear guests, thank you for tuning in. Please join us in our coffee conversation to continue the discussion on the topic of the session.